In the model tree, you see the structure of the model. The structure of the model can be shown in different ways, and the first one is the containment hierarchy. The containment hierarchy shows the spatial structure of the model, starting from the top, which is the file level, going to the project sites, building, and within the building you have the building stories, and within the stories you would have different groups of objects and then the individual objects. So all the way from the top at the project level up to the level of the individual element or component, as the Solibri calls these things. Whatever you select either in the model tree or using the info tool in the 3D view will be displayed in the info panel. And in the info panel you get a lot of information about whatever you have selected. If you would switch to a different hierarchy, in this case a component hierarchy, it works exactly the same way. You can navigate through the hierarchy, but in this case the hierarchy is grouped based on types of components and the main categories or classes. For instance, all the types of doors, and then the individual types, and underneath all the individual occurrences or instances of that door type. In this case you have a door 18, you may have a metal door, and there are 4 instances of that metal door. Also notice that Solibri automatically assigns a basic name based on the class of the object, the building story, and an index number. The third way to display the hierarchy is a so-called layer view. And in the layer hierarchy, use the layers, which are the representation layers from the IFC file. Depending on the software in which you made the model, this group of layers might be different. In this case, the model was grouped in walls, furniture, columns, slabs. So this layer structure was very close to the class hierarchy. But in other models or other software, or if you use a different configuration, it can be totally different. But the navigation is exactly the same. You see the layer, you see the different classes, and then the individual items on that layer. Finally, you get a federated floor hierarchy, which Solibri derives from the building story information. In this case, we have one building file with only 4 floors, and they are shown again as a group of objects, classes, and then the individual items on that group, from that group. For now, we continue to work in the containment hierarchy. In relation to that hierarchy, everything you select will be displayed in the info panel, and the info panel dynamically displays whatever information is attached to that object. And it's typically grouped in BIM data, standard, or other properties. In this case, only other properties are available, and favorites, where you can pre-select certain properties you always want to see. Let's, for instance, select in the viewport one of the walls in the facade. Here you see the BIM data, which is the information that Solibri collects about that object. Identification is a whole set of properties and attributes which identify the object. We won't go through all of them individually, but you can see that this is a way of summarizing whatever is available for that object. For instance, we can see in this case the entity uses IFC wall standard case and has a wall type. It is derived from a file in the IFC 2x3 format, and there is no predefined type. But you also see that the object has a name, a type, and a type name. And it has a unique identifier. If you click on another object in the hierarchy, for instance, we click on project, we would get a different structure. In this case, this entity is an IFC project. It has a name. In this case, face is one of the attributes available, and it has other information attached to it. Back to one of the wall objects. Apart from identification, we get location information. Where is that object positioned in the model? And Solibri collects a series of elevations, coordinates, and also the hierarchy, this part of the containment or spatial hierarchy. Quantities, which Solibri derives from the geometry, and all types of information collected from different places. Information about the materials. In this case, we see that the object is set up as a material layer set, and we can find information about the different layers. You have a layer set, you have a material layer, that layer has a thickness, and the material itself is a material, in this case with just a basic name. Profile, in this case it's a rectangular object, so it's created from a profile, so that object also has profile information. You find other relations defined in the IFC schema, and classifications, which can be defined either from an IFC file or within Solibri. And we will use them later on to further validate and check and verify the model. The standard properties are defined by Building Smart, and they depend on the object class or the object or the entity. In this case, for walls, it's common to have a property set wall common, which are a set of standard defined or default defined properties for walls. Whenever you see a property set starting with the name pset, you should be aware that this is a predefined property set by Building Smart. In this case, only one property has been used, the isExternal property. You can see its value. In this case, its value is true, which means this wall is in contact with the exterior environment, is part of the building envelope. And you also see the type, it's a Boolean value, which means it can have a value of yes or of true or false. Other properties can also be available, and in this case, these are not the standard properties by Building Smart, but the properties managed within the software. Here we see, for instance, base quantities, which is a set of quantities exported from the software, component properties. In this case, the model itself contains information, for instance, about the embodied carbon and energy, but their values are still set at 0. You have the quantities of the components. You will see that there is the thickness of one of the components, the mass, the area, the volume. Information about the materials attached to the object, and then a set of property sets. In this case, the properties have a certain naming convention, and that depends on the software. In this case, the model has been created in Archicad, and sometimes you even see this in the property names. You see different property sets, and every time each property set may have one or more properties. Again, property, value, and value type. And if you are familiar with Archicad, you might recognize some of these properties. In this case, all the default properties from Archicad are also available, but they don't have a direct impact on the geometry. They are just there to give you the potential use for collecting information, for finding something, for filtering. And also the quantities which are created by Archicad, which is quite an extensive list. At the top level, at the highest level in this case, the Solibri building, this is not an IFC entity, but this is the project file itself. And here you can find information about the metadata which is attached to in the header of the file. For instance, many of the settings which are used when converting the file, but that depends on how the software exports your IFC file. You see all the file name, you see a timestamp, so we know that this particular file has been exported on the 10th of November in 2021. And you can also see originally this file was created in Graphisoft Archicad version 2022. And you even see that's created from a Windows system. And also sometimes important, the version of the IFC schema is IFC 2x3. If we return to the main 3D view, and we can select all the objects, we can also take a quick look at the other views, the other tabs, but they are not functional in the Anywhere version of the software. Solibri Anywhere is a viewer, it's not a model checker, and the checking interface, the results interface, are available, can be shown, but they are not active.